Hey y'all, it's your girl Andrea Siobhan and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. So today I wanted to do a video pretty much talking about what it's like growing up in the ghetto. So it's a lot of people, I feel like, that have a lot of stereotypes about people that live in the hood, in the ghetto, that simply are not true. I definitely feel like, you know, when I tell people where I'm from, because they can usually tell by my accent, it's automatically like, oh, you from Baltimore? Like, I know you ratchet, I know you crazy. And I'm sitting up here looking like, okay, are you going to take the chance to get to know me? Like, growing up in the hood, in the ghetto, you know, it's not the ideal place, you know, for anybody to want to grow up. But for millions of people, it's not a choice. You're born where you're born, and it just is what it is. In today's video, I just kind of want to share my experience, maybe enlighten some people, educate some people about what it's like growing up in the hood. It's a lot of people that left the hood and did other things with their lives. There's some people that's still in the hood, that's still making a way and thriving. So, you know, it's not always negative, but it is, you know, of course, some parts and some dangers that go on, you know, in the ghetto. So let me get right into this video. So pretty much I was born in West Baltimore in the 80s. My grandparents had a house in the heart of the city. I lived there with, I think it was my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, and I want to say both of my aunts was there at the time, or maybe just one. I think my mother's oldest sister had moved out at the time. So my elementary school wasn't too far from my house, so I would, you know, my parents would, well, my mom, she would walk me back and forth to school every day, or my grandmother. And that was pretty much my life. We had a decent house, single family home with a porch. And my life was pretty simple starting out. I would go to school, I would come home, I would play with my friends, spend time with my family. I didn't really notice anything different about my life. Now, I do remember like some conversations amongst the adults. I definitely never felt like we were struggling or we just didn't have. So since I was born in the 80s, child, telling my age, we had a old school furnace. So the furnace that we had, you needed to purchase oil to heat up the furnace in order for it to work. So I remember the adults, you know, my mother and my grandparents, and I think my aunt was talking about getting the money up to, you know, get some oil to heat the furnace. And I don't think I really looked at that as we were struggling or anything. I just figured, you know, they needed to get some cash together to heat up, you know, the house. I didn't really understand the concept of money back then. So I would see little stuff like that, but I really didn't, you know, let it affect me, or was I being nosy? I was just a kid. So down the street from my house, it was a liquor store. At the time, I think it was owned by an Asian family. So in the liquor store, you know, they sold alcohol, but they also sold like candy, you know, bubblegum chips and sodas and stuff like that. And inside the store, they had bar stools. And I used to think they were so cool. I remember being little and trying to like climb up on a bar stool. Like, they were bolted into the floor, and they had like these little seats that you could kind of like swing back and forth, you could turn. And I would go in there with my mom and, you know, get snacks and stuff like that after school. So like on the outside of the liquor store, there would be these men out there. They were usually older men drinking too much, wasn't working. And like my family, they would call them winos. So it's like, okay, there's the winos, you know, older men drunk. And I remember they would kind of beg for money, and people would give them, you know, like $1 or some change, and they would go in the store and buy some alcohol and get toe up. The most they would do was kind of like, you know, be loud and belligerent, and maybe just like, you know, so okay, that was that. And you know, I mean, it kind of was like an eyesore in the community, but it's like, what can you do? You can't control grown people from drinking. So I remember going to school one day, I think I was like in the 2nd grade, and I remember my teacher said something like about all of us living in the ghetto. And I was just like, what? Who lives in the ghetto? Not me. Like, I live in the ghetto? Like, what are you talking about? So at the time, I used to watch, like, Good Times, and I'm like, okay, like, JJ and Michael live in the ghetto. Like, clearly, like, they live in the projects. Like, I don't live in the ghetto. Like, I have a decent house. I have a porch that I can sit on. JJ and Michael don't have a porch. They live in the ghetto. So I remember my teacher kind of saying something about, you know, living in poverty and stuff like that, and I remember her having a conversation with the class. I don't know exactly why we were even talking about that, but I remember it got to a point in time where I kind of went numb in the conversation, I guess. I was really little, but I guess I started kind of like tuning things out. So when my mom came to pick me up from school, I remember walking through my neighborhood on the way home, and like everything just looked different to me. So my neighborhood was pretty cool. Like, I remember, you know, kids walking back and forth with their parents. If it was some kids that might have had to walk to school by themselves, it definitely was a grandparent or an aunt or somebody standing outside on the corner making sure all the kids got across the street safely. Growing up, it definitely was it takes a village type of community that I grew up in. You know, everybody helped each other. You could knock on somebody's door for a cup of sugar or a cup of milk. Like, it was just a very community-based, community-helping neighborhood. So as I'm walking home after this conversation with my teacher, I remember kind of just looking at everything differently. Looking at the people's faces, you know, on the bus stop, and just people walking by, and everybody seemed to look like a bit stressed out. And I'm just like, you know, what's going on? Like, are we struggling? Like, am I living in a struggle? It was hard for me to understand, because it's like some people still were just like happy and, you know, full of life, but then I remember seeing things that didn't look that way, you know. So it was just a lot. So when I came home, you know, I just remember kind of feeling like I live in a ghetto. Like, you know, I'm in the struggle. I live in poverty. And even though I was young, I feel like I kind of knew what that was. We would go and visit, like, my uncles and aunts who, you know, moved out of the ghetto. They went to college, and they got nice places in the counties of Baltimore. And I remember going to their house and feeling like, okay, like, it's much quieter here. This neighborhood is way more calmer, and it was more diverse. The neighborhood I lived in, it was mainly black people. Like, a little further down in South Baltimore, it was like some white people, maybe like a couple of Hispanic people, but not much. Growing up in the 80s, it wasn't really diverse where I lived. So after visiting my aunts and uncles who moved out of the hood, you know, I would go back home, and I'm just thinking to myself, you know, when I get of age, you know, I would like to have a nice place like that. Not saying that my place wasn't nice, but, you know, it was just a different environment. It was a different type of vibe. So moving forward, I remember I might have been, I'm thinking like 4th grade-ish. I might be off with the grades, y'all. If I am, please forgive me, because this was a long time ago. I remember that Asian liquor store down the street from my house. The bar stools had been removed. They were there one day and then gone the next. And I remember, like, I wonder why they removed, you know, the bar stools or whatever. And I started to realize that the rhinos that was once there, they started to kind of disappear. And then in pops the drug dealers. And I remember they were like really young, attractive men with nice cars and nice leather jackets and jewelry, and they smelled good. They would be smoking, you know, maybe drinking a little something, and me and my mom would walk by, and they would be respectable, you know. They would say hi to my mom and like, oh, your little girl, you know, she's cute and stuff like that. And I just remember like the music blasting, and I remember seeing people's parents, some of my family members going to these guys on the corner and getting, you know, drugs. And I remember everything changed after that. Everything changed after that. My friends that I would see getting walked to school by their parents, a lot of them started walking alone. It was less and less people helping us cross the street. It was just less and less a sense of community. My father wasn't in the home anyway, but my friends that did have their father in the home, I remember families breaking up, people's fathers leaving because their fathers, developed an addiction. The mothers were addicted. A lot of grandparents were left to take care of the kids, and it just was really, really bad. It was really, really bad. And growing up in the 80s, it was like drugs were everywhere. And they definitely hit really, really hard in the ghetto, in the poorest places, People were already struggling. So I'm guessing, like, when something comes in, I guess that they thought that could offer them an escape, they jumped right on it, And it was like a whole campaign that was like geared towards the kids, say no to drugs. I think it was called Dare or something. And it was like Nancy Reagan was, over the whole thing. And I remember receiving like a Dare notebook, like pencils, flyers, and I was definitely with it because at that point in time, I hated drugs. I'm like, these are ruining my community, ruining my family members, my friends' families are falling apart. And I remember we decided to do a parade at my school that we were going to walk around the school. We was going to make some signs, some say no to drug signs, and walk around the school. So me and my friends, like, we were kind of laughing, being silly, because we was kind of scared, like, oh my God, like, we're going to go outside and, be saying say no to drugs and stuff like that. So we get our signs and we're marching like, say no to drugs, say no, we going off loud. And I remember seeing, like, drug addicts, okay, that's what they were, outside, like, pumping us up, like, yeah, kids, like, say no to drugs, say no to drugs. So I'm looking like, all right, y'all pumping us up, talking about say no to drugs. How about y'all just get off of drugs? Like, seriously, at the time I was a kid, so I thought it was just that easy. And, they was just kind of cheering us on and stuff like that. So we did the parade, we came back, we felt like we made a difference. And at this point in time, we ended up moving from the area that I lived in. We only ended up moving like around the corner. So, like I said, I'm from Baltimore. It's a show that was written actually called The Corner that was about Monroe and Fayette. And that's where I actually moved. So, go figure. So, I moved off of Monroe Street. And that was just a very, very big, busy street for drugs. And at this point in time, I had to start walking to school by myself. My best friend lived further down Monroe Street. And I remember the movie Dangerous Minds had came out. And they would name, like, to give the drugs, like, different names and stuff like that. Name them after stuff. I guess to kind of camouflage, I guess, what they were doing. So I remember, like, this guy, young, drug dealer, whatever. He's like, yeah, we got them, that Dangerous Minds, y'all. We got them Dangerous Minds, y'all. And I remember seeing, like, all these people, grandmothers, people. That's another thing. Like, when people get on drugs, I feel like their identity is erased. If people call them crackheads, and you know how Judge Mathis always talking about, a crackhead when he see one. And I mean, it does put people in a different type of state. But at this time, when I was looking at these people, because I was still young, these were people, grandparents. Yes, grandparents was out there, mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles. So anyway, the guy's giving out testes. At this point in time, people would give out drug testes. He was like in the alley. I saw all these people like running past me. I'm trying to walk down the street so I can get to my friend's house so we can go to school. They are literally running past me like they don't even see me. Like, if I didn't move out the way, they probably would have trampled me. Ran into the alley to get these drugs, okay? After that whole strip was crowded. Every day of me walking back and forth to school, I would be walking through a sea of junkies or drug dealers. At this point in time, like, some of my cousins was out there, so I would walk by and, they'd be like, hey, little cuz, like, what's up? Like, you want some money to go to the store? And I would say, yeah. And I remember one time I saw my one cousin, he pulled out like a whole wad of cash, and I'm just looking like, one of my cousins did that. He pulled out a whole wad of cash, child, and gave me a food stamp. So he gave me a food stamp, and I was like, okay, well, thank you. I still took it. Back in the day, you used to get paper food stamps, child, before they came out with the cards. So anyway, I would, take the little change and I would go to the store and, pretty much just go back to my house. But was just like a mess. Now, the block that I grew up on, like I said, it wasn't that far, so I would walk to go see my grandparents, walk to go see my grandmother and stuff. And that block was mainly like full of like homeowners and stuff like that. So they still would have like this thing in the summertime. I think it was called like Afro Clean Block. And it was like a big sense of community. Like everybody on the block would have cookouts together. Like we would all bring out our grills. My grandfather always had like these really big speakers, so he would bring out the speakers, and it would be like a really good time. I do remember the good times, like people lifting up the fire hydrant and water going everywhere, and we just having a good old time playing in the water. Like it still was a good sense of community going on, like, you know. But I'm not going to sit up here and act like the crime wasn't off the chain. At this point in time, it was like 8-ball jackets and stuff like that was out, and I remember kids were getting killed for their jacket. I used to go to this place called Shake and Bake. In the hood, it was a skating ring, and they had bowling too. Bowling was downstairs, skating was upstairs. And I remember like shootings there, like kids would get shot for their tennis shoes. You know, it was crazy. People, grandmothers coming home from the grocery store, parents, you know, coming home from work, and people snatching their purses. And, you know, and the reason why they were doing this stuff is because they were on drugs. Like, they were doing it to steal for money. Like, it was just like a lot of crazy things going on. It was like part of my life was fun. I had my friends, but then it was like a dark side that I just really didn't understand. And I knew that I wanted to get the hell away from that, you know. And I was really kind of over just being in the struggle and the despair and everything. So as time went on, you know, I'm in the hood, things are changing. I leave elementary school and I'm going to middle school, and that's when I feel like things got even crazier, because a lot of parents, like I said, were out of the household. And I remember I had this one friend, and she would come to school some days she wouldn't, some days she would be really, really late. And she was cool, she was a lot of fun or whatever, but I do remember she had like this angry side to her. And I remember like if anybody like said anything to piss her off, like she was quick to fight. So I remember like one day I kind of was like hanging out like in her area with another friend of mine, and we ended up having to go to her house for some reason. And I remember going to our house. Our house was really nicely well kept. There wasn't much in there, but I remember like she came in and she immediately started like cleaning up, and she like took like some frozen food and like put it in the oven, and she was like talking to our younger siblings and like asking them how school was and stuff, and was kind of getting them ready to transition into the evening. And I remember she offered us some water because she said she didn't have any juice or whatever. And we was like, you know, we cool or whatever. And at the time, I would say I probably was like in the 7th grade. Like this girl, like her boyfriend kind of was like staying there. I don't know, it was like crazy. But what I realized is that her parents were nowhere to be found. Like her parents were, you know, out in the streets. And everything started making sense, like why she didn't always come to school. She had a lot on her. She was being a parent to herself and her siblings. I do remember seeing her like at the grocery store, like at times with like a shopping cart she would pull home, and I thought maybe her mother was just sending her to the store, but then I realized like you're doing everything on your own. So seeing stuff like that, you know, it was just hard, you know. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand the struggle of the hood. Like I really feel like people think that people want to live a certain way, or people want to be ratchet, or people want to... The reality is a lot of us, you know, growing up in the hood don't even get the tools that we need to make it to the next level, because there's so many issues going on, so many generational curses that need to be broken, that we start off in a jacked up position. Like, you know, we start off in a household where there's drugs in the household, or people are struggling, or people don't have enough money to pay bills. We grow up in households, especially in Baltimore, where there was a lot of lead paint, and lead paint can really mess up your cognitive level. So it's like a lot of us start off with a crappy deck of cards, you know. I do remember churches being on every corner, And like I said in my spirituality video, how to start a spirituality journey, like at the time, a lot of our grandparents and stuff was still worshiping white Jesus. Like we didn't even really understand who we are, who we was, you know, as a people. So it was just like a lot going on. Like it was really nothing to grasp onto. If you didn't have somebody that made it out the ghetto and was going to reach back, or you had parents that had a progressive mindset, like you pretty much was on your own. You was on your own. And it's a lot of talented people in the hood. It's a lot of talented people, you know, in the ghetto. A lot of intelligent people. And like I said, my life wasn't all bad, you know, growing up. But a lot of those talents and a lot of the intelligence, you know, kind of gets pushed to the side because it gets to the point where you're in survival mode. Like you're trying to survive through the crime, you're trying to survive through the drugs, you're trying to survive through the rats and the roaches, or what type of poor housing condition that you have. I remember one time when I was younger, my mother got invited to a birthday party, and this was like my first time going into the projects. At the time, I think it was called Flag House Projects. And when we got there, we get to the door and it smells like urine. Like it smells like pee everywhere. I'm like looking up like, whoa, like these, you know, floors go all the way up. So at the time they had security from the Nation of Islam. And, you know, they were really cool, nice, greeted us, and they had to escort us into the elevator. So I get into the elevator smells like pee, it's graffiti everywhere. We get upstairs to her friend's apartment, and her apartment was well kept. But I remember kind of walking down the hallway to get there and looking down like, yo, what the hell? Like, we are up so high. Like, how can somebody live up this high? This seems very dangerous if anybody was to fall. So we go into the apartment. The apartment was so small, y'all. So small. I'll never forget how tiny it was. And I mean, she had it set up cute for her child's birthday party. You know how back in the day you had the little 30-cent juices, some hot dogs, you'll get some old school, you know, square cake or whatever, some chips and stuff like that. So we had a good time, but her apartment was really small. And you know, it's hard to live in a space where everybody's on top of each other. You know, and another thing that's really prevalent in the hood is mental illness. Like a lot of times people will be like, oh, these people don't keep their place together, they don't keep this clean. A lot of these people are mentally ill, you know, and then you're cramped into this small place that doesn't make any sense why they would even build something like that to have people on top of each other. Like Jay-Z said, you want to know why they call it the project. A project is because it's a project. It's a freaking project, you know. Just no way for anybody to want to live, you know what I'm saying? But a lot of those girls, you know, and my mother friend, I'm pretty sure, like, once you have kids and, you know, you work a job where you can't afford to get yourself a nice place, you end up having to get Section 8. You end up having to get food stamps, and when you get Section 8 or subsidized housing, those are the places that you have to go. You get pushed right back further into the ghetto, and it's not hard to not get dependent on those things. People are just like, oh, well, they paying $25 worth of rent. I don't know why they just won't get up and leave. Like, first of all, these people are stuck in the cycle of dysfunction. They're stuck in the cycle where I'm trying to get ahead, but I don't even have the educational level. Mind you, I grew up in a house that had lead paint poisoning, so it's like I'm already kind of set up for a failure. My mother didn't graduate, you know, this, that, and the third. I'm sorry, y'all, if my stomach is growling, because I did, if it's growling, I'm hungry. I did not eat today. Sorry not to get off topic. I'm on a keto diet and I need to eat. But, okay, so, yeah. So I was just going on a rant. But I'm going to do a part 2. Okay, I'm going to look through this video and see where I left off, edit it, and then I'm going to do a part 2. So this was kind of my introduction to growing up in the hood, growing up in the ghetto, growing up in the mean streets of Baltimore City. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're from Baltimore or another major city, and you grew up in the hood, please comment below. If I enlightened you today on some things, please comment below. If I said some things that pissed you off, comment below so we can get the conversation popping, and you know, I can give you my side of the story, my opinion, and you give me yours. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to share. I hope everybody has a blessed day. I will see y'all next time. All right, y'all. Peace.